The silence in the ballroom was louder than the shatter of crystal. 500 of New York's elite froze, their eyes locked on Elena. The crimson stain of a 1982 Chateau Margaux was spreading rapidly across the bodice of her cream silk gown, dripping onto the marble floor. Standing over her with an empty glass and a sneer of cold amusement was Victoria Sterling. "Oops," the matriarch said, her voice dripping with false innocence. "I suppose trash just attracts dirt." She didn't know that the woman shivering in wine-soaked humiliation wasn't just her son's unemployed wife. She was the shadow CEO of the very company Victoria was begging for an $800 million lifeline, and the ink on the contract wasn't dry yet. The air inside the Sterling estate in the Hamptons always smelled of old money, a mixture of polished mahogany, fresh hydrangeas, and the subtle, metallic scent of judgment. For Eleanor Vance, walking through the double oak doors felt less like coming home and more like entering a courtroom where the verdict had already been read. She adjusted the strap of her handbag, her knuckles turning white. Beside her, Julian Sterling, her husband of 2 years, offered a sympathetic but ultimately weak smile. "Just ignore her today, Elle," Julian whispered, squeezing her hand. "It's the merger announcement. Mother is on edge. Once the deal with Vantage Holdings goes through, she'll relax. We just need to get through the weekend." Elena looked at her husband. He was a good man, handsome in that soft, non-threatening way that came from a life where every obstacle was removed before he could trip over it. But he was terrified of his mother. "I always ignore her, Julian," Elena said, her voice calm. "The question is, will she ignore me?" "She has to," Julian insisted, though he didn't sound convinced. "This deal is worth $800 million. If Sterling Industries doesn't secure the capital from Vantage, the company goes under. She's too focused on business to bully you." Eleanor suppressed a dark smile. If only he knew, if only Julian knew, that the Vantage Holdings his mother was so desperate to court wasn't some faceless conglomerate run by old men in Geneva. It was a private equity firm founded 5 years ago by a brilliant, reclusive strategist named E.V. Vance. Eleanor. She had built Vantage from a small inheritance into a global titan, using her maiden name and a series of proxy boards to keep her identity shielded. She wanted to be loved for who she was, not her net worth. When she met Julian, she thought she had found that. She played the part of the supportive, freelance graphic designer, a humble job that didn't threaten the Sterling ego. But to Victoria Sterling, freelance meant freeloader. They entered the grand salon. The room was a masterpiece of intimidation, high ceilings, velvet drapes, and a fireplace large enough to roast a whole ox. Standing by the hearth was Victoria Sterling. At 60, she was a terrifying vision of preserved beauty, wrapped in emerald satin and dripping in diamonds that probably cost more than the education of everyone in the room combined. Standing next to her was Isabella Thorne. Tall, blonde, and possessing the predatory grace of a jungle cat, Isabella was the daughter of a senator, and the woman Victoria had actually wanted Julian to marry. "Ah, finally," Victoria said, her voice cutting through the ambient chatter of the early arrivals. She didn't look at Julian. Her eyes were fixed on Elena's dress, a simple, elegant cream gown Elena had designed herself. "Julian, you're late. And you brought baggage." "Hello, Victoria," Elena said, keeping her chin high. "The house looks lovely." Victoria swirled her drink, a scotch, neat. "Isabella was just telling me about her recent trip to Milan. She sat front row at Fashion Week. I suppose you've been... What is it you do again? Drawing cartoons on your laptop in your pajamas?" Isabella let out a light, tinkling laugh that grated on Eleanor's nerves. Now, Victoria, be nice. Not everyone is cut out for high society. Some people are just destined for domesticity. Domesticity requires skill, my dear, Victoria countered. I doubt Elena even knows how to set a formal table. Speaking of which, Elena, the catering staff is short-handed. Since you're not contributing anything else to this family, perhaps you could run to the kitchen and help them plate the hors d'oeuvres. Julian stepped forward, his face flushing. Mother, Eleanor is my wife. She is a guest. She is a liability, Victoria snapped, the veneer of politeness vanishing instantly. She stepped closer, invading Elena's personal space. Listen to me closely. Tonight, the representatives from Vantage Holdings are coming. This merger is the only thing keeping the wolves from the door. I need perfection. I need class. I need pedigree. Do not speak to them. Do not look at them. In fact, try to be invisible. If you ruin this deal with your common lack of sophistication, I will ensure you leave this marriage with nothing but the rags you came in with. Elena met the older woman's gaze. Her heart hammered against her ribs, not from fear, but from the sheer effort it took not to laugh. I am the deal, Victoria, she thought. I am the wolf at the door. I'll stay out of your way, Elena said softly. I wouldn't want to interfere with your business. Victoria sneered. Smartest thing you've said all year. By 8 p.m., the Sterling estate was at capacity. The driveway was a parking lot of Bentleys, Rolls-Royces, and Maybachs. The air buzzed with the chatter of millions being made and lost. Elena navigated the room like a ghost. She grabbed a glass of sparkling water and found a quiet corner near the French doors leading to the garden. From here, she had a perfect view of the theatre playing out before her. Victoria was in her element. She was holding court near the center of the room, laughing theatrically at a joke made by a banking executive. Julian was by her side, looking like a trapped animal, while Isabella hovered near him, her hand constantly brushing his arm, picking imaginary lint off his jacket. Elena's phone buzzed in her clutch. She glanced down. A secure text message. Sender. Marcus, Vantage Legal. I'm 10 minutes out. The NDA is prepared. Are you sure you want to go through with the reveal tonight? We can just pull the funding over the phone. Less messy. Elena typed back quickly. No, she needs to look me in the eye when she loses everything. Stick to the script. You are the proxy. I am just the wife until I say otherwise. Sender, Marcus, Vantage Legal. Understood, boss. Good luck. She slipped the phone back into her bag. Hiding? Elena looked up. It was Isabella. She held 2 glasses of red wine, offering neither to Eleanor. She took a sip from one, then the other, clearly testing them. Just observing, Eleanor replied. Isabella leaned against the wall, looking Eleanor up and down with a mixture of pity and disgust. You know, it's painful to watch. You trying to fit in here. It's like watching a golden retriever try to play poker. I wasn't aware poker was a prerequisite for marriage, Elena said. Survival is, Isabella whispered, leaning in closer. Victoria is going to crush you. You know that, right? Once this deal with Vantage is signed, the Sterling stock will skyrocket. The family will be billionaires again, liquid and powerful. Victoria has already spoken to the lawyers. She's drawing up a post-nuptial agreement she's going to force you to sign. If you don't, Julian gets cut off. And we both know Julian loves his comfort more than he loves, well, anything. Elena felt a cold spike in her chest. She looked at Julian across the room. He was laughing now, a champagne flute in hand, seemingly enjoying the adulation of the crowd. Would he choose her over the money? Julian makes his own choices, Elena said, her voice steady. Does he? Isabella laughed. He's a sterling. They don't make choices, they make investments. And you, darling, are a bad investment. Low yield, high maintenance. Suddenly, the music volume lowered. A hush fell over the crowd. Victoria was tapping a spoon against her crystal glass, standing on the small raised platform by the grand piano. Ladies and gentlemen, Victoria announced, her voice booming with practiced charisma. If I could have your attention. Tonight is a celebration of the future. As many of you know, Sterling Industries has been in negotiations for a historic partnership. I am thrilled to announce that the representatives from Vantage Holdings have just arrived at the gate. A ripple of applause went through the room. This merger will not only save thousands of jobs, Victoria continued, looking benevolent, but it will cement the Sterling legacy for another century. We are proving that resilience and breeding always rise to the top. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on Eleanor in the corner. Her expression hardened for a fraction of a second before returning to a plastic smile. But before our esteemed guests enter, Victoria said, I want to make a toast to family, to the people who support us, and to the pruning that is sometimes necessary to keep the family tree healthy. The crowd laughed politely, though some looked confused. Elena knew exactly what that meant. Pruning. She was the dead branch. Victoria stepped down from the platform and began to move through the crowd, heading straight for the corner where Elena and Isabella stood. A waiter followed her with a bottle of the vintage Chateau Margaux. Isabella, darling, Victoria cooed, ignoring Elena entirely. You look ravishing. Red is your color. Thank you, Victoria. Isabella beamed. Victoria turned to Eleanor, her smile vanishing. And you? You're still here? I thought I told you to help the staff. I'm Julian's wife, Victoria. I'm going to stay for the announcement, Elena said, stepping forward. The announcement, Victoria scoffed. You think you have a right to be part of this success? You, who brought nothing into this family but debt and awkward silences? The circle around them tightened. Guests were watching. Julian was making his way over, looking panicked. Mother, please, Julian said, reaching them. Not now. Ideally, never, Victoria snapped at him. But she insists on standing there like a statue. Victoria signaled the waiter. Wine, Victoria? The waiter asked. Yes, a full glass. I need something to wash down the taste of disappointment. The waiter poured the dark, rich liquid into Victoria's oversized glass. Victoria took it, swirling it dangerously. She looked at Eleanor. You know, this wine is older than you, Victoria said, and it has more complexity in a single drop than you have in your entire existence. It's refined, cultured. It belongs here. She took a step closer. The room went silent. Everyone sensed the violence in the air. You, on the other hand, Victoria whispered, loud enough for the immediate circle to hear, are cheap, store brand, disposable. Elena didn't flinch. Money can buy vintage wine, Victoria. It can't buy class. Victoria's eyes widened. The insult landed. Her face turned a shade of crimson that matched the wine. How dare you? Victoria hissed. I'm just telling you the truth, Elena said calmly. And the truth is, you're terrified. You're terrified of losing your status, so you attack anyone you think is beneath you. But be careful. You never know who you're actually talking to. Victoria laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. I know exactly who I'm talking to. A nobody. And then she tipped the glass. It wasn't an accident. Everyone saw it. Victoria didn't trip. She didn't stumble. She looked Elena dead in the eye and flicked her wrist forward. The contents of the glass, a generous 6-ounce pour of deep, pigmented red liquid, slashed through the air. It hit Elena square in the chest. The cold liquid soaked instantly into the delicate cream silk. It splashed up her neck, spotting her chin, and ran down the front of the dress in jagged, bleeding rivers. It looked like a gunshot wound. Gasps erupted from the crowd. A woman near the front covered her mouth. Elena stood frozen. The shock of the cold, the smell of the alcohol, and the sudden, crushing weight of 500 pairs of eyes on her was almost physical. Victoria stood back, feigning a look of shock that didn't reach her eyes. She brought a hand to her mouth in a mock gasp. "Oh! Oh my goodness!" Victoria cried out, her voice pitched high for the audience. "How clumsy of me! But, well, you shouldn't have been standing so close, dear. You really are always in the way, aren't you?" Julian rushed forward, grabbing a napkin from a passing waiter. "Elena! Oh God, Mother! What did you do?" "It was an accident, Julian," Victoria snapped, dropping the act immediately. "Though honestly, that dress was an eyesore anyway. I did it a favor." Isabella snickered. It was a soft sound, but in the silence it sounded like a gunshot. Eleanor pushed Julian's hand away gently. She didn't wipe the wine. She didn't try to clean it. She simply looked down at the ruin of her dress, then up at her mother-in-law. The humiliation was burning her cheeks, but beneath it, something colder and harder was solidifying. The final tether of mercy she had held for Julian's family just snapped. "You're right, Victoria," Elena said. Her voice was not loud, but it projected with a strange, icy authority that made people lean in. "I was in the way. I won't be any more." "Good," Victoria sneered. "Go upstairs and change, or better yet, leave. The Vantage executives will be here any second, and I don't want them to see this mess. You look like a disaster." "I am a disaster," Elena agreed. "For you." Before Victoria could process that remark, the heavy double doors of the grand salon swung open. The room turned. 3 men in sharp, charcoal suits walked in. They were flanked by security. In the center was Marcus Sterling, no relation, ironically, the public face of Vantage's legal team. He looked serious, holding a thick leather portfolio. Victoria's face transformed instantly. The sneer vanished, replaced by the glowing, obsequious smile of a hostess desperate for cash. She literally turned her back on Eleanor, leaving her daughter-in-law dripping with wine to greet the money. "Mr. Holloway," Victoria beamed, mistaking the lead lawyer for the CEO. "Welcome. Welcome to Sterling Manor. We are so honored." Marcus Holloway didn't smile. He stopped 10 feet away from Victoria. He looked at the crowd, then at Victoria, and finally his eyes drifted past her to the woman standing behind her, soaked in red wine. Marcus's eyes widened. He looked from the wine stain to Victoria's smug face. His jaw tightened. "Mrs. Sterling," Marcus said, his voice deep and carrying to the back of the room. "We were under the impression that this was a formal celebration of a partnership based on mutual respect." "It is. It absolutely is," Victoria gushed, oblivious to his tone. "Please ignore the domestic disturbance behind me. Just some clumsy help. We can move to the library to sign the papers." "The papers are ready," Marcus said. He held up the portfolio. But the CEO of Vantage Holdings insisted on being present for the signature. "They wanted to meet you personally." Victoria clapped her hands. "Wonderful. Is he in the car? Should I send Julian to escort him in?" "She is already here," Marcus said. Victoria froze. "She?" "Yes," Marcus said. He stepped aside, clearing the path. He wasn't looking at the door. He was looking at Elena. "Mrs. Vance," Marcus said, addressing Elena with a deferential nod that sent a shockwave through the room. "We are ready to proceed, though do you require a moment to address the assault?" The silence that fell over the room now was absolute. It was a vacuum. Victoria turned slowly, her neck creaking with tension. She looked at Elena. The clumsy help. The nobody. Elena took a step forward. The wine dripped from her hem onto the expensive Persian rug. She didn't care. She reached up and unpinned her hair, letting it fall around her shoulders, framing her face in a way that looked suddenly, terrifyingly regal. She looked at Marcus. No, Marcus. I don't need a moment. I think Mrs. Sterling and I have done enough posturing. Elena turned her gaze to Victoria. The older woman's face had gone the color of ash. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock. You, Victoria whispered. You. Vantage? Vantage, Elena corrected her, her voice smooth as silk, is short for Vansage. My company. My money. My decision. Elena took a step closer to Victoria, ignoring the wine soaking her skin. You wanted to close the deal, Victoria? Elena asked. You wanted the $800 million to save this crumbling estate and your bankrupt legacy? Elena. Victoria stammered. She looked at Julian for help, but Julian was staring at his wife as if he was seeing an alien. I am the CEO of Vantage Holdings, Elena announced to the room. And as of 5 minutes ago, I was prepared to sign a check that would have saved this family from ruin. She looked down at the wine stain on her chest. She ran a finger through the wet fabric and held it up, showing the red liquid to Victoria. But it seems, Elena said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper, that you've decided to decline my offer. After all, you wouldn't want to take money from trash. The silence that had fallen over the grand salon was heavy enough to crush bone. For 10 seconds, the only sound was the distant hum of the air conditioning and the frantic, shallow breathing of Victoria Sterling. Victoria looked at the woman she had tormented for 2 years. She looked at the wine stain on the cream dress, a stain she had put there moments ago with a flick of her wrist. But now, the stain didn't look like a mark of shame. It looked like war paint. You're lying, Victoria whispered, her voice trembling. This is a joke, a sick, twisted joke. Julian, tell her to stop. Julian Sterling was pale, his eyes darting between his mother and his wife. He looked like a man waking up in a burning house. He took a hesitant step toward Eleanor. Elle? He asked, his voice cracking. What is she talking about? Vantage Holdings? You design logos for startups. I design corporate restructurings for Fortune 500 companies, Eleanor corrected him, her voice devoid of the warmth he was used to. The graphic design job was a cover, Julian. I wanted a life where people didn't ask me for loans before they asked me how my day was. I wanted to know if you loved me or the portfolio. She looked at him with a sadness that cut deeper than anger. I got my answer tonight. You watched her humiliate me. You watched her pour wine on me. And you did nothing. You didn't defend your wife. You defended your inheritance. I was trying to keep the peace, Julian stammered, sweating now. Peace is for people who are equals, Julian. This wasn't peace. It was a slaughter, Elena replied. Isabella Thorne, who had been enjoying the spectacle moments ago, suddenly realized the gravity of the situation. Her eyes widened as she looked at Marcus Holloway, the lawyer. She recognized him now. He was the shark of Wall Street, a man who had dismantled the Thorne family's own shipping rival 3 years ago. Victoria, Isabella hissed, grabbing the older woman's arm. Shut up. Shut up right now. That is Marcus Holloway. If she's with him, she's not lying. Victoria pulled her arm away, her denial fracturing into panic. She looked at Elena, forcing a jagged, terrifying smile onto her face. Elena, darling, Victoria began, her voice pitching up an octave. Let's not be hasty. We're family. Families have spats. The stress of the merger, the heat in the room. Surely you understand. I was just testing you. Yes, testing your resolve. A CEO needs to be tough, right? The desperation was palpable. The crowd of elites watched with morbid fascination. This was better than the opera. This was the collapse of a dynasty in real time. Elena turned to Marcus. Marcus, what is the current valuation of Sterling Industries without the capital injection from Vantage? Marcus opened the leather portfolio. He didn't even look at the papers. He knew the numbers by heart. Sterling Industries is currently leveraged at 400%, Marcus recited calmly. They have a $300 million balloon payment due to the Sovereign Wealth Fund in Dubai next Tuesday. Without the $800 million from us, the company is insolvent. Essentially, the stock is worth less than the paper it's printed on. A gasp went through the room. The guests, many of whom held sterling stock, began pulling out their phones, frantically texting their brokers to sell. Victoria swayed. No, that's private information. It's public record when you apply for a bailout, Elena said. I've spent the last 6 months analyzing your books, Victoria. You've been skimming from the pension fund to pay for your lifestyle. The renovation of this estate? Paid for by the employee severance pool. The yacht in Monaco? Bought with a bridge loan you can't repay. Elena took a step closer to her mother-in-law. The smell of the wine on her dress was pungent, filling the space between them. I was going to save you, Elena said softly. I was going to cover the debt, restructure the board, and let you keep your title just so Julian could be happy. I was going to sign that check tonight. You still can, Victoria cried out, reaching for Elena's hand. Her fingers brushed the wine-soaked silk. Elena, please, for Julian. We can forget this happened. I'll apologize publicly. I'll throw you a party. Elena looked at Victoria's hand on her arm with utter disgust. She pulled away sharply. The deal is dead, Victoria, Elena declared. Her voice rang out like a gavel striking a block. Vantage Holdings withdraws its offer, effective immediately. You can't do that, Julian shouted, finally finding his voice. Elena, we're married. That money is community property. You can't just withhold it. Elena turned to her husband, a cold smile touching her lips. Actually, Julian, do you remember the prenuptial agreement your mother forced me to sign? The one she said was to protect the sterling assets from gold diggers? Julian blinked. Yes. Read Clause 4, Section B, Elena said. It states that all assets acquired by either party prior to the marriage and all business ventures maintained separately remain the sole property of the individual. Victoria made that ironclad because she thought I was penniless. She wanted to make sure I couldn't touch your trust fund. Elena laughed, a dry, humorless sound. She inadvertently protected my billions from you. I don't owe you a dime. She turned back to Marcus. We're leaving. And Marcus, call the bank. Which bank, Mom? The one holding the mortgage on this estate, Elena said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Tell them Vantage is purchasing the note. If the Sterlings miss a payment by 1 hour, I want foreclosure proceedings to begin. Understood. Elena turned on her heel. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea. She walked with her head high, the wine stain looking like a badge of honor, her wet dress swishing against her legs. Victoria screamed after her. You can't do this. I am Victoria Sterling. You are a nobody. Come back here. Fix this. But Elena didn't look back. She walked out the double doors into the cool night air, leaving the Sterling legacy burning to the ground behind her. The morning sun hit the penthouse suite of the Pierre Hotel, casting long shadows across the Persian rugs. Elena sat on the balcony, wrapped in a plush white robe, watching the hustle of Manhattan 50 floors below. She hadn't gone back to the apartment she shared with Julian. She had her security team retrieve her essentials, and then she had checked into the presidential suite under her own name. Her phone on the glass table was buzzing incessantly. 47 missed calls from Julian, 12 from Victoria, and 3 voicemails from Isabella Thorne, which Eleanor assumed were varying shades of vitriol. She took a sip of black coffee. She felt lighter than she had in years, but there was a hollow ache in her chest. She had loved Julian, or at least she had loved the version of him she thought existed. "Mum." Eleanor turned. Marcus was standing in the doorway of the balcony, looking fresh in a navy suit. "The markets have opened," Marcus said. "Sterling Industries is down 60% in pre-market trading. The news of the failed merger leaked. They're calling it the red wine crash on Twitter." Eleanor sighed. "I didn't want to destroy the company, Marcus. There are 3,000 employees who have nothing to do with Victoria's ego. We have a plan for them," Marcus reminded her. "If the stock drops another 10 points, we can execute a hostile takeover. We can buy the company for pennies on the dollar, fire the board, specifically the Sterling family, and restabilize the assets. The employees keep their jobs. The Sterlings lose everything." "Do it," Elena said. "But keep my name off the press release for now. I want them to sweat." "There is one other thing," Marcus said, hesitating. "Mr. Sterling is downstairs. Security is holding him in the lobby. He says he won't leave until he speaks to you." Elena looked at her coffee cup. She knew this moment was coming. The confrontation. "Send him up," she said. "But Marcus, stay in the room. I don't want to be alone with him." 10 minutes later, the elevator doors chimed. Julian walked in. He looked like he hadn't slept. His tuxedo shirt from the night before was unbuttoned at the collar. His hair was messy, and his eyes were red-rimmed. He stopped at the entrance of the suite, taking in the opulence. This was a room that cost $20,000 a night. It was a level of wealth even the Sterlings, in their current cash-poor state, couldn't justify. "Elle," he breathed out. Eleanor didn't stand up. She remained seated on the balcony sofa. "Hello, Julian." He rushed toward her, falling to his knees beside the sofa. He tried to grab her hands, but she pulled them into her lap. "Elle, please," he begged, his voice hoarse. "You have to stop this. Mother is... She's having a breakdown. The doctors are with her. The bank called at 6 a.m. about the house. They're saying we have 48 hours to pay the arrears or they're seizing the property." "That's standard protocol for distressed assets," Elena said calmly. "You bought the debt," Julian cried. "You're doing this. Why? Because she spilled wine on you. Is that worth destroying my life?" Elena stared at him, incredulous. "Is that what you think this is about? A dress?" She stood up, walking to the edge of the balcony. "Julian, for 2 years, I listened to your mother call me trash. I listened to her mock my family, who worked in factories so I could go to college. I listened to her tell you I wasn't good enough to bear the Sterling name. And every single time, you said nothing. You let her chip away at me because you were too afraid of losing your allowance." "I defended you," Julian protested weakly. "You whispered defenses," Elena shouted, spinning around. "You whispered when you should have roared. Last night was just the breaking point. She didn't just spill wine, Julian. She tried to erase me. She tried to make me small in front of the very people I do business with. If I hadn't revealed myself, she would have kicked me out on the street to please the Vantage executives." Julian lowered his head. He knew she was right. "I can fix it," he whispered. "I'll stand up to her. I promise. Just pause the takeover. Release the funds. We can go to counseling. We can start over." Elena looked at him. He was a beautiful, broken thing. "I have a question for you, Julian," she said softly. If I were still just Elena, the graphic designer, and your mother had kicked me out last night, would you have followed me?" The silence stretched. Julian opened his mouth, then closed it. His eyes darted away. That hesitation was the death knell of their marriage. "You would have stayed," Elena said, her voice flat. "You would have stayed for the champagne and the comfort." "No, Stop!" Elena commanded. She walked over to the desk where Marcus had placed a file. "I have something for you." She tossed a blue folder onto the coffee table. "What is this?" Julian asked. "Divorce papers," Elena said, "and a job offer." Julian stared at her. "What?" "I'm buying Sterling Industries," Elena explained. "The announcement goes out in an hour. I'm firing the entire C-suite. Your mother, your uncle, and you. None of you are qualified to run a lemonade stand, let alone a conglomerate." Julian's face went white. "You're firing me." "However," Elena continued, "I am not heartless. I know you have no marketable skills. So, the offer in that folder is for a position as a junior logistics coordinator at the Sterling warehouse in Ohio." "Ohio?" Julian gasped. "Warehouse? I'm the vice president of operations." "You were a vice president in title only. You never stepped foot in the factory," Elena said. "The salary is $45,000 a year. It comes with health insurance. If you want to learn how to actually work, take the job. If not, rely on the trust fund that I'm about to freeze pending an audit of company embezzlement." Julian stood up, trembling with rage. "You're a monster. You tricked me. You pretended to be someone else." "I pretended to be poor," Elena said coldly. "You pretended to be a good man. My lie was harmless. Yours broke my heart." She gestured to the door. "Marcus, show Mr. Sterling out. He has a flight to catch if he wants to make the shift in Ohio by Monday." Julian looked at the folder, then at Eleanor. For a moment, she thought he might throw it at her. Instead, the reality of his situation crashed down on him. He had no money. His mother was about to be destitute. This job, this humiliating, blue-collar job, was his only lifeline. He grabbed the folder. "I'll never forgive you for this," he spat. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, Julian," Elena said, turning back to the view of the city. "I'm asking for results. Don't be late." Julian stormed out. The door clicked shut. Elena let out a long breath and leaned against the railing. "That was brutal," Marcus commented from the corner. "It was necessary," Elena replied. "But we're not done yet. Julian is weak. He'll fold. But Victoria is a viper. She won't go down without trying to bite." Marcus nodded. "She's already making moves. My contacts say she's trying to meet with Horace Thorne." Elena's eyes narrowed. Horace Thorne, Isabella's father, a corrupt senator with deep ties to the darker side of corporate lobbying. If Victoria was going to him, she wasn't looking for money. She was looking for revenge. "She's going to try to block the takeover legally," Elena surmised. "Or she's going to try to dig up dirt on Vantage to blackmail me." "What do you want to do?" Marcus asked. Elena smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Let her try," Elena said. "I have an $800 million war chest and the truth on my side. But if she brings Senator Thorne into this, then we need to call in the cavalry." "You mean?" "Yes," Elena said. "Get me the private jet. We're going to D.C. If Victoria wants to play dirty politics, I'm going to introduce her to the man who owns the politicians." The Hay Adams Hotel in Washington, D.C., was where the powerful went to whisper secrets too dangerous for the White House. In a private corner booth of the Lafayette dining room, overlooking the White House, Victoria Sterling sat across from Senator Horace Thorne. Victoria looked impeccable, though her hands trembled slightly as she stirred her tea. Beside her sat Isabella, who looked less like a jilted fiancé and more like a campaign manager plotting a coup. "Horace, you have to do something," Victoria pleaded, keeping her voice low. "She's destroying us. She's frozen the company accounts. She sent my son, your future son-in-law, to a warehouse in Ohio. It's madness." Senator Thorne cut into his steak with precise, surgical movements. He was a large man with silver hair and the kind of smile that stopped reaching his eyes 30 years ago. He was the chairman of the Senate Banking Committee, a man who could freeze $1 billion with a single phone call. "Victoria," Thorne rumbled, his voice deep and gravelly, "you're asking me to intervene in a private, corporate takeover. Vantage Holdings is a legitimate equity firm. Elena Vance, this girl you say was your daughter-in-law, seems to have followed all SEC regulations. Hostile takeovers are ugly, but they aren't illegal." "She's a fraud," Isabella interjected, leaning forward. "Daddy, she lied about her identity for 2 years. That has to be some kind of fraud. Wire fraud? Identity theft? She accessed Sterling family records under false pretenses." Thorne chewed slowly, considering this. "It's a stretch, Bella. But I suppose we could frame it as a national security concern. Sterling Industries manufactures turbine parts for the Navy, doesn't it?" "Yes," Victoria grasped at the straw. "We have defense contracts. If Vantage takes over, who knows where that technology goes? Elena is, well, she's unstable, vengeful." Thorne wiped his mouth with a linen napkin. "If I launch a Senate inquiry into Vantage Holdings regarding foreign ties or security clearance issues, it would trigger an automatic freeze on all their pending acquisitions. The takeover would be halted for months, maybe years. It would bleed her dry in legal fees." Victoria's eyes lit up with malicious hope. "Do it, Horace. Freeze her assets. Starve her out. Once she's bankrupt, we can buy back the debt for pennies." "I can do it," Thorne said, leaning back. "But Victoria, my re-election campaign is facing a severe shortfall. And Isabella, well, Isabella was supposed to marry a CEO, not a warehouse worker." Victoria understood the transaction immediately. "If you save the company, Horace, I will give you a seat on the board, and 10% of the stock. As for Julian, he will be reinstated. He will marry Isabella within the month." "And the girl?" Thorne asked. "Elena?" "I want her destroyed," Victoria hissed. "I want her in prison, or at the very least, destitute." Thorne smiled, pulling out his encrypted phone. "Consider it done. I'll call the DOJ and the SEC. By tomorrow morning, Elena Vance will be the subject of a federal investigation. She won't be able to buy a cup of coffee, let alone a company." 3 hours later, Elena was sitting in the back of an armored SUV, driving through the rainy streets of D.C. Her phone lit up. It was Marcus. "Bad news, Elena," Marcus said, his voice tight. "We just got a cease and desist order from the Department of Justice. Senator Thorne just announced a probe into Vantage Holdings. They've frozen our liquid capital. The takeover is stalled." Elena looked out the window at the blurred lights of the Capitol building. She didn't look panicked. She looked bored. "He's predictable," Elena said. "I expected Thorne to play the national security card. It's the only move he has." "Elena, this is serious," Marcus warned. "With the assets frozen, we can't make the debt payment on the Sterling estate. Victoria might actually get to keep her house. And if this drags on, investors will get spooked. You could lose Vantage." "I'm not going to lose Vantage, Marcus," Elena said calmly. "Thorne thinks he's hunting a rabbit. He doesn't realize he's standing in a bear trap." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to the Blackwood Gala tonight," Elena said. "The Blackwood?" Marcus sounded stunned. "That's Thorne's fundraiser. Tickets are $10,000 a plate. You're not on the list." "I don't need a list," Elena said, checking her makeup in the rearview mirror. "I bought the catering company catering the event an hour ago. Technically, I'm serving dinner." She hung up and tapped on the partition. "Driver, take us to the service entrance of the National Building Museum." The Blackwood Gala was the event of the season. Senators, lobbyists, and defense contractors mingled under the massive Corinthian columns of the Great Hall. Champagne flowed, and Senator Thorne was the star of the show, shaking hands and accepting checks. Victoria Sterling was there, wearing a new dress, likely charged to a credit card she couldn't pay off, looking triumphant. She stood beside Isabella, beaming as Thorne recounted how he had stopped a hostile foreign threat earlier that day. "To the Sterling legacy," Thorne toasted, raising a glass. "To the end of trash," Victoria whispered, clinking her glass against his. Suddenly, the lights in the massive hall flickered. The giant screens behind the stage, which had been displaying a loop of Thorne's campaign slogans, went black. A hush fell over the crowd. "Technical difficulties," Thorne muttered, waving a hand to an aide. "Ignore it." But then the screens flared to life again. But it wasn't a campaign ad. It was a spreadsheet. It was dense, complicated, and filled with numbers. But highlighted in red were a series of transactions labeled Project Orion, offshore routing. Thorne froze. His face went pale. A voice echoed through the hall, amplified by the sound system. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen." The crowd turned. Standing on the balcony overlooking the hall, dressed in a tuxedo that fit her like armor, was Eleanor. "Security!" Thorne screamed. "Get her out of here! That woman is a trespasser." "I'm not a trespasser," Eleanor said, her voice calm and amplified. "I'm a whistleblower." She walked down the grand staircase, descending toward the stage. The security guards hesitated. They recognized the look of someone who held all the cards. "What you are seeing on the screen," Elena announced, pointing up, "are the financial records of the Thorne Foundation. Specifically, the money laundering channels used to funnel defense contract kickbacks into private accounts in the Cayman Islands." Gasps erupted. Flashbulbs began to pop blindly. "That's a lie," Thorne roared, sweating profusely. "Those are fabricated." "Are they?" Elena reached the bottom of the stairs. She pulled a small USB drive from her pocket. "Because these records match the metadata from the servers at Sterling Industries. You see, when Victoria asked you to block my takeover, she didn't realize that I had already acquired the Sterling IT department's backups." Elena turned to Victoria, who looked like she was about to faint. "Victoria," Elena said, her voice dropping to a conversational tone that the microphone still caught. "You were skimming from the pension fund, yes, but you weren't keeping it. You were paying him." She pointed at Thorne. "Senator Thorne has been blackmailing the Sterling family for years to keep your government contracts alive. Isn't that right?" The room was dead silent. Every eye was on Victoria. I, Victoria stammered. "Admit it," Elena pressed. "Admit it, and I might show mercy on the foreclosure of your house. Deny it, and I release the emails where you discuss bribing a federal judge." Victoria looked at Thorne. He looked like a cornered rat. He wasn't going to save her. He was already signaling his lawyer. Self-preservation kicked in. Victoria crumbled. "He made me do it," Victoria shrieked, pointing a trembling finger at the senator. "He said he'd cancel the Navy contract if we didn't pay him monthly consulting fees. He drained us dry. That's why we were broke. That's why I needed the merger." Pandemonium broke out. Reporters were shouting questions. Two men in suits, FBI agents who had been attending the gala undercover, began moving toward the stage. Elena stepped back, allowing the chaos to consume them. She looked at Isabella, who was standing alone, tears streaming down her face, her social status evaporating in seconds. "You called me a bad investment, Isabella," Elena said softly as she walked past her. "But it looks like your father was the liability all along." Elena walked toward the exit. Marcus was waiting for her by the door, holding a coat. "You just took down a sitting U.S. senator and the sterling matriarch in under 5 minutes, Marcus said, grinning. "Remind me never to spill wine on you." "The DOJ just called," Marcus added, as they walked out into the cool night air. "The investigation into Vantage has been dropped. They're pivoting to investigate Thorne and Sterling Industries for racketeering. The freeze on the assets is lifted." "Good," Elena said. "Complete the takeover, fire the board, and Marcus—" "Yes, boss. Evict Victoria from the Hamptons estate. Tonight." The drive back to the Hamptons usually took 2 hours, but for Victoria Sterling, the journey felt like a lifetime. She had been released by the FBI pending further investigation, her passport confiscated, and her reputation shredded on national television. She arrived at the gates of the Sterling estate at 3:00 a.m. The towering iron gates, usually welcoming, remained shut. Victoria rolled down the window of her town car. "Open the gate!" she screamed at the intercom. "It's Mrs. Sterling!" A static crackle answered her, but it wasn't the voice of her usual security guard, old Thomas. It was a fresh, crisp voice. "I'm sorry, Mum. This property is under the management of Vantage Holdings Asset Recovery. Entry is restricted." "Restricted? I live here. Open this gate before I have you fired." "I don't work for you, Mum," the voice replied. Suddenly, the side pedestrian gate clicked open. A figure stepped out into the harsh headlights of the car. It was Eleanor. She was still wearing her tuxedo from the gala, though she had traded her heels for sensible loafers. She held a clipboard. Victoria scrambled out of the car, her knees weak. "Eleanor, you can't lock me out of my own home." "It's not your home, Victoria," Eleanor said, checking a box on the clipboard. As of midnight, the bank exercised the foreclosure clause. Vantage Holdings purchased the deed. You are technically trespassing. "Where am I supposed to go?" Victoria wailed, looking at the dark mansion that had been her identity for 40 years. "All my things. My jewelry. My furs." The personal effects that were purchased with embezzled company funds have been seized by the DOJ as evidence, Elena explained calmly. "However, I did ask the movers to pack up your legitimate personal belongings, the things you owned before you married into the Sterling family." Elena gestured to the curb. There were 3 cardboard boxes sitting in the wet grass. Victoria stared at them. 3 boxes. I have a closet full of Chanel. Bought with stolen pension money, Elena reminded her. In those boxes you'll find some old photo albums, your high school yearbooks, and the coat you were wearing in 1980. The rest stays. Victoria fell to her knees in the mud. The grandeur was gone. The arrogance was gone. She was just an old woman in a ruined dress, crying on the side of a road. "Why are you doing this?" Victoria sobbed. "Is it because I didn't like you? Because I wanted better for Julian?" Elena looked down at her. "You didn't want better for Julian, Victoria. You wanted a puppet. You taught him that worth is determined by a bank account. You taught him to look down on people who actually work for a living. You broke him long before I met him." Elena turned back toward the gate. "Wait," Victoria cried. "Please, just give me enough for a hotel. The plaza. Anywhere." Elena stopped her. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, crumpled bill. She dropped it into one of the cardboard boxes. It was a $20 bill. "There's a Motel 6 on the highway," Elena said. "They leave the light on for you. I hear it's very cozy." The iron gate slammed shut with a final metallic clang, locking Victoria Sterling out of her paradise forever. Meanwhile, 400 miles away in Dayton, Ohio, the reality of the Vantage takeover was hitting Julian Sterling in a very different way. The Sterling Logistics warehouse was a cavernous, freezing metal box that smelled of diesel and cardboard. Julian stood at conveyor belt 4, wearing an orange safety vest that was 2 sizes too big. "Hey, new guy!" a voice bellowed. Julian flinched. The shift supervisor, a massive man named Stan who had forearms the size of ham hocks, was glaring at him. "You missed a scan on that package," Stan barked. "That's a write-up. 3 write-ups and you're docked pay." I'm sorry," Julian stammered. "My hands are cramping. I've been standing here for 6 hours." "Boo-hoo," Stan mocked. "My grandmother works harder than you. Pick up the pace, Sterling. We got quotas." Julian gritted his teeth and grabbed the next box. His manicured fingernails were broken. His back ached with a fire he had never known. He looked at the label on the box. It was a shipment of engine parts going to the Navy. He remembered the days when he would sit in the boardroom, looking at spreadsheets of these shipments, sipping espresso and complaining that the margins were too low. He had never touched a box. He had never looked at the men who moved them. "Break time," Stan yelled. 15 minutes. Julian slumped toward the break room. He bought a stale coffee from the vending machine with the few coins he had left. On the wall, a small television was playing the news. Breaking news: the fall of the House of Sterling. Senator Horace Thorne indicted on 12 counts of corruption. Victoria Sterling evicted. And the mysterious CIO of Vantage Holdings, Elena Vance, announces a record profit-sharing bonus for all lower-level employees. Julian stared at the screen. The footage showed Eleanor walking out of the Sterling HQ in New York. She looked radiant, powerful, and free. She was surrounded by cheering employees, the very people Julian had ignored for years. A tear slid down Julian's cheek, landing in his styrofoam cup. "Hey," a co-worker said, sitting down next to him. "You okay, man? You seeing this? That new CEO is a saint. I'm getting a $5,000 bonus next week. Finally gonna fix my car." Julian looked at the man's happy face. "Yeah," Julian whispered. She's amazing." "You know her or something?" the co-worker asked, laughing. Julian looked at the screen one last time as the camera zoomed in on Eleanor's hand. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring anymore. "I used to," Julian said softly, "but I think I made that up." 6 months later, the boardroom of the newly rebranded Vantage Sterling Group was unrecognizable. The dark, oppressive mahogany paneling had been replaced with sleek glass and living walls of greenery. The air felt lighter. Elena sat at the head of the table. She wasn't wearing a power suit today. She was wearing a simple, elegant cream dress, identical in color to the one Victoria had ruined, but this one was silk, tailored in Paris, and spotless. "The Q3 numbers are in," Marcus said, projecting a chart onto the wall. "Since we ousted the old board and implemented the profit-sharing model, productivity is up 40%. We've regained the Navy contract legitimately, thanks to full transparency. The stock is at an all-time high." Elena nodded, signing the final page of the report. "Excellent work, Marcus. And the charitable foundation?" "Fully operational," Marcus confirmed. "The Sterling Family Victim Fund, which you hilariously named, is now providing scholarships for the children of the employees Victoria tried to defraud." Elena smiled. It was a good life. It was a busy life, but it was honest. "That's all for today," Elena said. "Everyone, go home. It's Friday." The executives filed out, leaving Eleanor alone in the office that used to belong to Julian's father. She walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out over Central Park. The autumn leaves were turning gold. She thought about where she was a year ago, hiding her success, walking on eggshells, apologizing for existing. She walked to the wet bar in the corner of the office. On the counter sat a bottle of wine. It was a 1982 Chateau Margaux. Elena picked up the bottle. She didn't have a corkscrew, but she didn't need one. She simply looked at the label. "You know," a voice said from the doorway. Elena turned. It was a man she had met recently, David, an architect she had hired to redesign the employee housing. He was kind, self-made, and had no idea how much money she had until the third date. "That's an expensive bottle to leave unopened," David said, leaning against the doorframe. "It's not for drinking," Elena said, placing the bottle back on the shelf. "It's a reminder." "Of what?" "That some stains don't ruin you," Elena said, smiling. "They reveal you." She walked over to him, grabbing her coat. "Ready to go?" David asked. "I found this great little taco place in Queens. It's cheap, loud, and the food is amazing." Elena laughed. It was the most beautiful sound in the room. "That sounds perfect," she said. "I'm done with fancy dinners." She took his hand and walked out of the office, flipping the light switch. The room went dark, leaving only the city lights reflecting off the glass bottle of wine, a trophy of a war won, a ghost of a past life, gathering dust in the dark while Eleanor walked into the light. The fall of the Sterling dynasty wasn't just a corporate collapse. It was a masterclass in karma. Victoria Sterling learned too late that the trash she tried to sweep away was actually the foundation holding up her entire world. Julian learned that silence in the face of injustice is just as loud as the insult itself. And Elena proved that true power doesn't scream, it waits. In the end, Elena didn't just get revenge, she got freedom. She turned a moment of humiliation into an empire of integrity. It's a reminder to everyone watching, be careful who you step on today, because they might be the ones signing your paycheck tomorrow. What did you think of Eleanor's revenge? Was sending Julian to the warehouse too harsh, or did he deserve it? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, please hit that like button, share this video with a friend who needs some drama, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story.